project team. The recording is in progress now. So on behalf of the project team, I would like to welcome everyone to the first Public Information Center for this study. Thank you very much for your time and your interest in this study. And in respecting everyone's schedule, we will be sticking to the timeline to end the meeting around 8:30 this evening. So our information center will start with a pre-recorded presentation, which will start shortly after my introduction. The presentation itself is about 30 minutes long, and it includes material on the study background, the process and schedule of the environmental assessment study, planning context and existing conditions, what are the problems and opportunities that we're trying to address, some of the planning solutions that we're considering, and an early look at design consideration and the next steps. The presentation may answer some of the questions that you may have, but if not, don't worry. We have a Q&A period after the presentation until around 8:30 to answer them. So the panelists with us here this evening include City of Barrie Project Manager Bradford, other consultant team members from SEMA Plus, Phil Weber, the Project Manager, Gilly Thompson, who's the EA Process Lead, myself, who is the Preliminary Design Lead and also the moderator for this evening discussion. We also have our project engineer, Kay Barkley, who will be handling the Zoom technology this evening. And as noted before, this Zoom meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the study website. But other information that you'll be finding on the website includes this pre-recorded presentation that's upcoming, and also a PDF of the presentation slide itself. This meeting is being run in a webinar format. If you have any questions during the pre-recorded presentation, there is a Q&A button in the Zoom menu bar, which Kate right now on screen has shared with you, highlighting the Q&A button. From there, you can put in so during the pre-recorded presentation, put in your name, the slide number, and a quick topic in that sidebar. So for example, I can put in Catherine Jim, slide 12, active transportation planning. So this way, it allows us to virtually queue up the participant during the Q&A session. And once the presentation is over, we'll be able to unmute you in that order so you can ask your question in full. That way, you can stay focused on the presentation without typing out the whole question. We do have the presentation package on hand, and we can queue back to the specific slides as appropriate. I do want to take this opportunity to thank those who have submitted questions prior to this information center during the registration process. We would provide a direct response to individual following the information center, but following this pre-recorded presentation, we will also speak to the response to some of those questions on a high level. If you still need more details, please feel free to type in the question, like I said before, in the Q&A sidebar. Excuse me. We'll try our best to answer all the questions this evening during the Q&A, but in respecting everyone's time, in the event that we don't get to all the questions before 8:30, be sure that all the comments and questions are recorded. A summary report is going to be prepared for this evening's event, and we will be providing a response in the summary report. Alternatively, there's also a space on the study website where you can click and submit your comments and questions via a survey form. Information on where to look for this online form will be on the last slide of the presentation, so everyone will be clear where to look for that. If you provide your contact information to us, we will be able to provide a response to you directly. So with that, we will get going with the pre-recorded presentation.
Welcome to the first Public Information Center for the Bradford Street Corridor Class Environmental Assessment Study. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also acknowledge the Huron-Wendat Nation, who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. We are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. This is the first of 3 Public Information Centers, or PICs, planned for this study. The intent of this video presentation is to provide an overview of the PIC material. If you wish to review the content in more detail, a static version of the presentation is available as a PDF file on the city's website at the link shown on the slide. This package can be downloaded at any time for review at your own convenience. While your feedback is welcome at any time during the study, we ask that any comments on this PIC package be provided by February 25, 2022, so that the project team can incorporate your feedback into the next phase of study. We encourage you to submit your input and feedback through the project webpage. The purpose of this PIC is to introduce the study, outline the study schedule and Class EA process, review planning context and existing conditions, review problems and opportunities and possible solutions, present early design concepts, and obtain community feedback and identify next steps. The provincial and municipal policy framework provides a backdrop to the planning process and guides infrastructure, land use planning, and strategic investment decisions. It is important to have an understanding of this context early in the planning process to ensure decision-making is aligned with the city's growth and transportation objectives. Barrie City Centre is designated as an urban growth centre in the province's growth plan. Land use in this urban growth centre is transitioning to higher density mixed use consistent with provincial policies and the city's own downtown revitalization plans. To support this growth, the transportation network must be thoughtfully planned in a way that offers safe and convenient mobility for all road users, including drivers, transit riders, pedestrians, cyclists, mobility device users, and other forms of active transportation. This study is focused on long-range corridor planning to confirm future multimodal needs on Bradford Street. Multimodal transportation planning considers the needs of different road users to plan for and build a network that offers transportation options that are accessible and effectively integrated. This study is considering the future needs of active transportation users, transit, and vehicles over the next 3 decades. The study will also identify opportunities to improve traffic operations and safety, streetscape design to complement future land uses, and the property required to accommodate these improvements. Currently, no capital works are planned for Bradford Street. However, this study may generate interim recommendations that could be considered in the short term. The Municipal Class Environmental Assessment process is a planning and approval framework for municipal infrastructure used to identify possible adverse effects of proposed infrastructure projects on the environment. Given the scale of the study, our Class EA process has 4 primary phases, each with opportunities for agency, public, and Indigenous community engagement. We are currently in phase 2 of this process and are hosting this PIC to review the background information gathered and problems and opportunities identified in phase 1 and the alternative solutions that are being considered in phase 2. Based on the feedback gathered through this PIC, the alternative solutions will be assessed and the preferred solution for the corridor will be confirmed and presented at PIC number 2. Thereafter, the study will progress to developing design alternatives in phase 3. In phase 4, an environmental study report will be prepared to document the study recommendations and decision-making process. This report will be available for public review at the end of the study. Barrie's growth forecasts are based on the province's growth plan. Barrie is currently planning for a population that will almost double in the next 30 years. The city's urban growth center will be the focus of intensification to accommodate planned growth. The city will manage this growth through the construction of high-density, mixed-use developments in the city center and improving access to more sustainable mobility options like walking, cycling, and transit, while creating safer and more attractive streets. Taller residential buildings will be encouraged, which will capitalize on the nearby waterfront as a key development attraction. Residential developments will be accompanied by commercial spaces that enable people to live and work within a completed, urban-friendly, walkable community. Intensification is the process of increasing the density of an already built-up area through redevelopment and infill. This slide illustrates the intensification underway in Barrie's downtown. Active developments are highlighted in blue on the map. This intensification will help foster a more active urban environment by making places more accessible to walking and cycling and creating more vibrant public spaces to enhance a feeling of community. The city's 2019 Transportation Master Plan, or TMP, provides direction on transportation investments to 2041 with a focus on providing safe, efficient, and accessible mobility choices. For Bradford Street, the TMP includes a few key findings and recommendations. The existing 4 lanes will provide capacity for traffic volumes forecast to 2041. Therefore, no new travel lanes are being proposed. There is a desire to attract traffic away from Lakeshore Drive. Therefore, Bradford Street must offer a good level of service for vehicular traffic and transit. Space should be protected for a 2-way center left turn lane or median to provide flexibility in meeting future needs. Tiffin Street intersections operate poorly now, and this issue will continue to worsen. Therefore, intersection improvements are needed. There is also a need to enhance mobility and provide a sense of livability and safety in the streetscape. Cycling facilities and an improved pedestrian and street environment are required to support these objectives. Building on the TMP, the Bradford Street Class CA will be taking a closer look at traffic operations in the corridor to 2051 to identify further issues and needs. This could include intersection reconfiguration, additional turning lanes, traffic signals and signal timing, and/or other modifications. The city's TMP also includes a comprehensive active transportation strategy that provides a blueprint for enhancing walking and cycling infrastructure, accommodating planned growth, and improving mobility options and equity. The TMP recommends a cycle track on Bradford Street, which is aligned with the city's vision to offer a continuous, well-connected, and safe active transportation network for residents and visitors that supports recreational and commuter active transportation opportunities, enhances connectivity to key destinations, and increases mobility for users of all ages and abilities. Today, there are no cycling facilities on Bradford Street. We will use the recommendations of the Active Transportation Strategy and the recently updated Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18 to develop a cycling facility for the corridor. Factoring into our decision-making about the future needs of Bradford Street is the Allendale Mobility Hub, an interregional transit hub at the Waterfront GO station to coincide with the arrival of all-day GO service to Barrie. This transit hub will provide a geographically centralized hub within the city and increase transit access to the GO station. Bradford Street will be a critical multimodal transportation link between the mobility hub, the downtown mini hub on Maple Avenue, and areas for planned intensification. The next few slides focus on the existing conditions of the corridor, starting with land use. The existing land use around Bradford Street is a mix of low-density residential houses and commercial businesses with some institutional uses, including city offices and the Barrie Wastewater Treatment Facility towards the south end of the study area. As we have highlighted on previous slides, land use along Bradford Street is planned for transition to higher density mixed use consistent with the city's official plan. We are taking an integrated approach to transportation planning in that we are considering not only potential impacts to existing land uses, but we are anticipating how the future community will look and their needs. A review of the natural environment is being carried out in support of this study. Natural environmental features in the study area are limited to 4 creeks flowing into Kempenfelt Bay. These creek corridors are narrow and consist of culturally influenced vegetation communities typical of urban settings. There were no species at risk or potential habitat observed in the study area, and habitat potential is limited to urban adapted wildlife. As the study progresses, we will identify potential impacts to these watercourses and recommend mitigation measures to protect the natural features. A cultural heritage report has been prepared to inventory known and potential built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes in the study area. Background historical research is used to determine the presence of sensitive heritage features that correspond to 19th and 20th century settlement and development patterns. In addition to this research, the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industry Screening Tool and professional expertise is used to identify properties as potential built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes. A number of potential and known heritage resources have been identified in the study area, including 3 properties on the Municipal Heritage Register. The Allendale Station, designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, is located adjacent to our study area. Heritage resources will be considered through the decision-making process. Once a preferred design has been selected, the report will be updated to include a heritage impact assessment and recommend mitigation measures. This map depicts the location of identified built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes in the study area. We encourage you to download the PDF file of this information package on the city's website to review this map in more detail. A Stage 1 archaeological assessment has been completed for the Bradford Street corridor to assess archaeological potential and confirm where further archaeological assessment is required. Some properties where redevelopment is already proposed have been previously assessed and will not require further study. Other areas exhibit archaeological potential and will require a Stage 2 assessment prior to any future construction. The Allendale Station is an ancestral Huron-Wendat village and ossuary with established cultural heritage value. A Stage 4 archaeological excavation is in progress, and outcomes will inform the remaining work and detailed recommendations for the remainder of the property. The city is extremely sensitive to the cultural heritage significance of the Allendale Station lands. If any potential impacts are proposed in this Class EA study, all appropriate work will be undertaken to protect cultural heritage values in partnership with Huron-Wendat First Nation and the Williams Treaty First Nations. This slide provides an overview of the general transportation conditions in the corridor. Bradford Street serves an arterial function in the city's downtown, providing a north-south connection around Kempenfelt Bay. The existing roadway generally has a 20-meter right-of-way with 2 travel lanes in each direction and curbside sidewalks on both sides of the street. The posted speed is 50 kilometers per hour. The city's 2019 TMP considered future overall travel demand in the city at a network level and confirmed the 4-lane road capacity on Bradford Street is adequate for future growth up to 2041. As part of this study, we are taking a closer look at intersection operations to better understand the specific needs in the area in 2031, 2041, and 2051. The map on the right side of the slide illustrates the future capacity of nearby intersections during PM peak hours in 2051. By this point, the intersections at the north and south end of the study area are over capacity and will require improvements beyond those already planned by the city. In particular, the Tiffin Street intersections at Bradford Street, Essa Road, and Lakeshore Drive will become very congested with long delays and potentially unsafe operating conditions. The intersections at Tiffin Street are essential nodes in the transportation network because they facilitate movement around Kempenfelt Bay. In recent years, increased demand paired with the physical configuration and short distance between the intersections is causing a number of operational issues at this location. The traffic analysis indicates that these operational issues will continue to worsen in the future, and the intersections are expected to be operating beyond capacity by 2031. Based on the background information gathered and reviewed, the planning context, existing and future conditions, and early stakeholder input, we have identified several problems, opportunities, and needs for the Bradford Street corridor. These needs include the provision of active transportation facilities for users of all ages and abilities, improving the streetscape to create a vibrant and inviting downtown, and creating a multimodal connection between the Allendale Mobility Hub and downtown. All the work up to this point has been setting the stage to develop a clear statement of the issues to be addressed by the study. The overall objective is to continue to provide critical arterial road function and improve sustainable transportation options for users of all ages and abilities. The problem and opportunity statement emphasizes planning for continued community transformation in the city's urban growth center, the importance of Bradford Street as a critical link within the city's downtown multimodal transportation network, the existing traffic operational and safety issues that will continue to worsen if not addressed, and the opportunity to plan for the future needs of Bradford Street now and protect adequate right-of-way to accommodate cycling, improve the pedestrian and streetscape environment, and provide future flexibility for the city to improve the corridor in a way that promotes community activity and vibrancy. A key question that came out of early stakeholder feedback was whether Bradford Street could be reduced to 2 travel lanes. The project team has included this option among the alternative planning solutions for review and consideration. One of the key aspects that we will need to consider is how traffic is distributed within the downtown road network and the impact to roads that will result from removing travel lanes on Bradford Street. For example, increased traffic on Lakeshore Drive or impacts to transit efficiency on Bradford Street. We note also that maintaining 4 lanes now does not preclude future decision to reduce lane capacity and provides the city with the most flexibility in planning for the next 30 years, recognizing that specific needs within the right-of-way may change in the future. These aspects will be explored in the next few months. We have identified 6 alternative planning solutions that will be assessed in how they address the problems and opportunities for Bradford Street. The do-nothing solution maintains the existing corridor with no improvements and serves as a baseline to which other alternatives are compared. Access management focuses on integrating surrounding land use redevelopment to reduce the number of individual driveways and accesses, to improve traffic flow, and reduce the number of potential conflict points with pedestrians and cyclists. Operational improvements address traffic operational issues and could include intersection reconfiguration, two-way center left turn lane, or other changes such as signal timing. Bradford Street corridor improvements addresses multimodal and traffic operational needs on Bradford Street and includes cycling facilities, improved sidewalk and streetscape environment, improved transit infrastructure, and addressing geometric deficiencies while maintaining the existing 4 travel lanes within an expanded right-of-way. Reduced travel lanes on Bradford Street is similar to option 4, but looks at a reduction of travel lanes on Bradford Street. Lastly, improve other north-south corridors considers improvements to other parallel roads instead of Bradford Street. The assessment and evaluation of the alternative planning solutions considers numerous criteria across a broad range of socioeconomic, cultural, natural environment, transportation, and technical factors. At this stage, we've completed a very preliminary review of some of the pros and cons to each alternative. Please refer to the PDF file of this information package on the city's website to review this table in more detail. Our work over the next few months will involve a more comprehensive assessment and evaluation of the alternative planning solutions. More than one solution may be carried forward to ensure the future function and design of Bradford Street is aligned with the city's strategic priorities. We encourage you to provide your input on these alternative solutions, as this feedback will help to inform the assessment process. The preferred solutions will be presented at the next Public Information Center, planned for spring 2022. Following the selection of the preferred planning solutions, the design process consists of key decision points for various roadway components. This is considered phase 3 of the EA process illustrated earlier on slide 7. The diagram on the slide highlights the key components of the roadway design. The first step is to identify design considerations and constraints that should be factored into the design. These may be desired functions, physical features, geometric requirements, or limitations that could influence future design decisions. As the design progresses and our knowledge of conditions and constraints evolve, it is typical to have iterations at each step along the way. As we initiate the design phase, we look at the corridor through different lenses to identify various considerations and constraints that will guide the development of the design. The points on this slide have been developed based on the study objectives and input from stakeholders. Key design considerations include technical design requirements, consideration of major utilities, transit needs such as space and types of amenities for transit stops, cycling facility needs and tie-in to the broader cycling network, and integration with developments including access. While the preferred solutions are being assessed, the project team is looking ahead to possible concepts for the intersection configurations on Tiffin Street and different cycling facility options for the corridor. These are presented on the next few slides to invite early public input and discussion. 2 intersection concepts have been developed for Tiffin Street. The first involves conventional signalized intersections and the second involves roundabouts. We are introducing these design concepts to provide the public with an early view and invite feedback. There is still much work to be done in refining all of the details, but these concepts provide us with an idea of the footprint impacts associated with addressing the existing and future issues on Tiffin Street. This slide depicts two reconfigured signalized intersections at Bradford Street and Lakeshore Drive. Traffic signals would be coordinated to manage queuing between the intersections. You will notice that the concept includes some correction to the curb on Bradford Street, north of Tiffin Street. This has been made to meet technical design standards. Please review the details by going to the PDF file of the information package on the city's website. In this concept, multi-lane roundabouts are used in place of the signalized intersections. Tiffin Street has been realigned at the approaches to the roundabouts to meet technical design requirements. As with the signalized intersection option, there is still a lot of work to be done in refining all of the details, but this concept provides us with an idea of the footprint impacts associated with the roundabouts. Roundabouts are being considered because they have a number of potential benefits, including lower speeds and fewer conflict points, high vehicular traffic capacity, less idling and reduced emissions, lower maintenance costs, and opportunities for landscaping within the footprint. However, we recognize that a roundabout option in an urban environment carries disadvantages, including a large footprint and property impacts, potential navigational challenges for pedestrians and cyclists, and in the context of Tiffin Street, the pedestrian and cyclist crossing would likely require a tailored solution that may reduce the traffic capacity and efficiency of the roundabout. The roundabout option will be fully assessed and evaluated against the conventional intersection design, considering multiple factors and impact to all users. The context and setting will be significant factors in this assessment. Cycling facilities are a key component of the design for Bradford Street to support the creation of a multimodal transportation network in downtown Barrie. The city's 2019 TMP proposed cycle tracks on Bradford Street. As part of this study, we are considering the original TMP recommendation and using recently updated provincial guides in the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18 that reflect the current design guidelines and best practices. The three-step framework to determine a suitable cycling facility type for a specific roadway corridor is summarized on the right side of the slide. Step 1 of the process is to select the preferred level of separation and set of facility types based on vehicle speeds, volumes, and the road cross-section. The outcome of this step will then be examined further in the context of the road design and documented in steps 2 and 3. Based on the posted speed and anticipated volumes on Bradford Street, physically separated cycling facilities are necessary. These facilities include elements such as curbs, planters, and bollards that provide physical separation between people riding bikes and motor vehicle traffic. Facility types include physically separated bike lanes, cycle tracks, and multi-use paths. A key difference between physically separated bike lanes and cycle tracks is the elevation of the cycling facility. Physically separated bike lanes are on-street, whereas cycle tracks are elevated above the vehicle lanes. A distinguishing factor of multi-use paths is that they are shared by cyclists and pedestrians. The next few slides will present some different ideas of what these options can look like. Physically separated bike lanes are at street level and are separated from vehicle lanes by a horizontal buffer and physical barriers such as a planter, bollard, or curb. The physical separation provides most cyclists with a more comfortable riding environment compared to shared roadways or conventional bike lanes. It may not be as inviting as a facility that is horizontally and vertically separated from vehicles. Cycle tracks are physically separated bikeways that are horizontally and vertically separated from vehicle lanes by a curb and a horizontal buffer. They are often parallel to the sidewalk, but are designated exclusively for people riding bikes. We are considering two different locations for the placement of the cycle track in the Bradford Street corridor. The different placements may offer advantages from an operations and maintenance perspective, such as snow storage and winter clearance. In this example, the cycle track is located next to the roadway. In this option, the cycle track is located between the boulevard and the sidewalk. The boulevard provides more separation between the roadway and cyclists. In this cross-section, a tactile strip is typically placed between the cycle track and the sidewalk to delineate the separate areas designated for pedestrians and cyclists. Lastly, the Boulevard's multi-use path is horizontally and vertically separated from vehicle traffic. This is more likely to occur in higher volume pedestrian areas such as at transit stops or shopping areas. After we receive exhibit feedback gathered from this PIC, the next step is to confirm the preferred solution and the nature of the improvement to Bradford Street corridor. The outcomes of this step will be presented at PIC number 2 to be held this spring. Following the selection of preferred solutions, we will move to phase 3 process and have the design concept be further developed and formally evaluated to identify the preferred design alternative. The preliminary design of the recommended plan will be presented at PIC number 3 and for fall of 2022. After this consultation milestone, the preliminary design and impact assessment will be finalized. Lastly, the environmental study report will be prepared to document the study findings. We appreciate the time you've taken to learn more about this study and are looking forward to hearing your feedback and materials presented at this PIC. To provide your input, please visit the public input section of the project website. If you would like more information about the study or are interested in providing feedback, please reach out to City Project Manager at Bradford directly. Once again, thank you for your interest and participation in this study.
Apologies, everyone. We noted that there is a bit of a glitch in our presentation sound right around slide 34 and onward. So apologies for that. We can, as I noted before, the presentation itself is pre-recorded. You can certainly download it from the website again and have a look at those slides. But in a nutshell, the slides that we've gone through between slide 34 to 35 are related to some of the options in cycling facilities. I'm just looking over to my slide deck on my right-hand side to do a bit of a quick summary because we do recognize, some of the important active transportation facilities that we want to consider include cycling, cycling tracks, cycling lanes. These are the potential. So we are looking at these different types of physically separated bike lane at this time, and we will be reviewing those in further detail as we get into the design process, but certainly recognizing the provision for cyclists is one of the most important things for this corridor improvement. And on the last slide, we talked about some of the next step and timeline in this study. So in this case, we'll be looking at another public information center in springtime, where we'll be looking at the preferred solutions. And also later on, after that, we will be developing our design concepts based on the preferred solution. And that third public information center, we're anticipating it to happen in the fall of 2022. And then thereafter, we'll be preparing an environmental study report, which will be documenting the decision-making process of this study, and it will be filed for public review. That's at the very end to our study. So let's see, I'm just looking at, I know some questions were posted during our Q&A, so we will be, I know some of it mostly is related to the sound, so we will address that. I do see some of the questions that are coming up, but before we dive into and formally start our Q&A session, like I mentioned earlier, we have received some questions prior to the information center. I just want to take a moment really quickly to speak to some of those. The two main themes that we have received are the consideration of two-lane Bradford Street and also making sure that we're providing a solution that is fitting for an urban street environment in the city center. And in response to what we have heard, we have certainly included the potential of a two-lane Bradford Street as one of the planning solutions, which we will be studying more closely as we progress in the next phase of our study. We want to remember too that when we're looking at a transportation improvement to a road corridor, it is not done in isolation. We do look at transportation needs in the context of a whole network. So for example, if we are reducing lanes on Bradford Street, what does it mean for other parallel roads such as Lakeshore? So certainly more analysis will have to be done to take a look at that in terms of what effect it may have on the whole network. We also have adjusted our study timeline to thoroughly investigate these planning solutions, and we are incorporating an additional information center to allow us to take that extra opportunity to engage a member of the public and share our information. We talked about recommendation from the Transportation Master Plan. So if we were to step back to look at some of the recommendations, there are really no change in the travel lanes from the existing condition of the 2-lane in each direction, despite a doubling in population in the future. So the recommendations to include the 2-way left turn lane is mainly to facilitate redevelopment to a built form that is inherently more sustainable and supportive of greenhouse gas reduction. And to the point of higher density development, it is intending to allow for more efficient use of municipal infrastructure. And these higher density development too will also restrict parking spots, which will, also strongly support the uptake of walking, cycling, and also transit use. The other core aspect of this project, the objective that we're looking at is to create a significantly more improved streetscape, making it more inviting environment for walking and cycling, and really to support all road user. And finally, a wider boulevard space here, our intention is to provide a flexibility in the future, see if we can incorporate, tree planting using soil cell technologies and also more advanced stormwater management strategies, such as low impact development, which very much rely on the natural process to remove total suspended solid and phosphorus that go into Lake Simcoe ultimately. So really our intention is to plan for a streetscape that is suitable for a downtown environment and try to really plan ahead and get ahead of development and identifying infrastructure needs in the long term right now. So maybe with that, I'll pass it on to Brad, who will be speaking to some comments that we received about greenhouse gas emissions and also the environmental impact considerations as part of the study. Brad, over to you.
Hey everybody, thanks again, and thanks again for Seaman Plus for putting this together. It's excellent work. And thanks everyone for attending tonight and taking the time to spend it with us this evening. And I think, Catherine, actually, I think you touched on most of the elements of the greenhouse gas aspect. There was concern, and we will be evaluating this for both the 5-lane solution and a reduced lane solution, what generates the most. But with the 5-lane solution itself, it's important to look at and deconstruct that solution. So hitting on the note that the travel lanes are the same, so the capacity is generally the same. And really what we're facilitating with that 2-way left turn lane is that redevelopment, that higher built form, higher density. And as you said, Catherine, that's really where we're going to get our best bang for the buck in terms of achieving our active transportation mode split goals, getting people away from cars. It's difficult to get that to happen in suburban areas, single family houses. It's demographic issues with that too, families, etc. But where we can really make our mark and really push the envelope is on these intensification corridors in Bradford Street itself. So like you said, Catherine, with higher density, with these developments, we'll be pulling back parking availability. So most homes will only have access to one parking spot versus what you traditionally see at ground level housing. And some units might not have parking at all. So those people will all rely on high quality active transportation infrastructure. And they'll all be really relying on a good transit service that runs on time as an efficient service as well. And like building on that really just dovetails into being a bit repetitive here would be, again, widening those boulevards to really facilitate that high quality AT infrastructure. If anyone's walked on Bradford Street today, you're right adjacent to the travel lane. So that's really a lower level of service from a multimodal perspective. So we'd like to plan to improve that to where it needs to be to reflect the plans for redevelopment on Bradford Street itself.
Great. Thanks, Brad, for that. So maybe with that, we'll go to some of the questions that we have received so far. So I know the first few comments related to the audio, so we'll skip ahead of those. And the first question is from Kelly. So you noted slide 10, you wanted to ask questions about the traffic volumes and also some of the current volume.
And I've turned on Kelly's microphone so she can ask the question live.
Perfect.
Hi there. Thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. Yes, I have a question regarding, it's kind of a math question. It has to do with if we're increasing our volume of people in the city from 156 to 298,000. What is the, how do you calculate the vehicles that attach to those people? And how do you know that the volume of vehicle need is going to be the same?
Mm-hmm. So maybe with that, Phil, would you mind taking this traffic related question?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's not a linear relationship. Like, we don't assume, for instance, that if we double the number of people in a city or a metropolitan area, that the number of car trips is going to double as well. In fact, we apply a factor to assume that, for instance, with increase in the city size, there's going to be a what we call a modal shift to more transit use. So that is an assumption that's been made here. So, for instance, the city had a transportation master plan that was carried out a number of years ago. And with that, a lot of the assumptions that we carried through in this study followed from that study. So that study, the transportation master plan, for instance, formed the basis of what you see in the diagram on the left, number of lanes for some of these major roads and things like that. So Bradford Street was part of that transportation master plan. And so a lot of the major roads like Tiffin Street and Dunlop Street and everything else were part of that transportation master plan. But the assumption is that as a city center or as a metropolitan area grows, there is a gradual shift to higher modes of transportation like transit. So that has been part of the assumption here as well, that when the traffic grows in Bradford Street, there will be a shift so that as traffic grows, there's going to be less and less of a, as the population grows, there's going to be lesser and lesser growth in traffic. So kind of over time, traffic grows like this, but then it starts to kind of taper off over time. So that's the assumption that's been made here.
Oh, okay.
That answers your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. So I guess just a follow-up, if I may. We're building a 4 or 5 lane road, but we're also, on the other hand, considering, getting people out of cars and providing a more effective transportation. I just see it's very conflicting on Bradford Street.
Well, the 4 lane road's already here, right? So we're not
right.
actually, so it's there now. We're not
right. Yeah,
building a new road. It's
right. The with the 5 lane, I guess, is one of the concepts, right? With the
we're considering, shoehorning in an extra lane in the middle, but it's not for extra traffic. It's really just for access, to access the extra density that we're planning for the corridor. So that is one option, but it's not the only option.
I do appreciate the addition of the looking to incorporate the 2 or 3 lane option as well. I do appreciate that addition, because I think we really do need to think about how we reduce our greenhouse gases, and that's through less personal vehicles in the province of Ontario are one of the highest emitters of greenhouse gases, and one of our goals in the city of Barrie, according to our official plan, is to help reduce that. So I think we really need to take a long, hard look at Bradford Street in particular. Given the pandemic, with more people working at home, I think this is a real shift for us to think about, and we need to also incorporate that in our planning. But thank you very much for the answer, Phil. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. So
I'm just going to build on that quickly too. And that's great, Phil. And one of the things that we were just thinking about, some of these comments we've had surrounding greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a great discussion back and forth on that. We're open to receiving comments just on broader transportation trends in general. And I think if we see that coming through the study, we can document that in the study and also have the opportunity to present that to council for future considerations. So when I was thinking about these comments coming through, some things came to my mind that are relevant, maybe as important to members of the public. So presently, as development occurs on Bradford Street, especially these high-rise buildings, we can request secure bicycle storage, but we can't require it right now. And maybe that's something that the public feels strongly about, our ability to more forcefully require that TDM, so transportation demand management aspect, to ensure that this development fosters that. Another thing that came to mind too is EV charging. So when we speak to emissions, the federal government's banning the sale of internal combustion engines by 2035. So when these developments are built today, if they're not constructed to be EV ready, that's a significant barrier for adoption in the future. So maybe there's thoughts about maybe we should be looking at that in a more formal way and having that built into these developments to support that same goal of greenhouse gas emission reduction. So there's some food for thought that although we are looking at this, we're open to kind of broader transportation type feedback that we can document the study and also share with council as we go through this process.
That's really great, Brad. I really like those comments. I think that's very important to get our builds to incorporate those type of services that will all help us reduce that greenhouse gas footprint.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Kelly, again. So our next question is from Jim Harris. So Jim, you're up next. So your question is related to the roundabout slide, and also it noted challenges for cyclists and pedestrians with safe navigation, and how are we, how can we share how the facilitation of active transportation is being weighted in the assessment, and which option is the best? So Jim, maybe we'll pass it to you first to ask the question if you want to add on to any of it before we jump into an answer.
Hi, no, that's my question is just simple as that. I just noted in the slide about roundabouts, you know, there's the pros, there's the cons, and the one con that jumped out at me was the cyclist, the impact on cyclists, which obviously we want to encourage. So I just wanted to see how that was weighted in the total assessment of which was the best option. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So yeah, certainly, you know, the consideration of how cyclists and also pedestrian would maneuver through a signalized intersection or roundabout is one of the many factors that we'll be looking at. As we noted in the presentation as well, you know, the current OTM Book 18, the Ontario Traffic Design Manual, allow us to look at what are some of the safe pedestrian and cyclist crossing in the design of signalized intersection as well as roundabout. So in the next stage of our study, you know, as we look into more closely, you know, not just in terms of, you know, how pedestrian and cyclists may cross these facilities, that's certainly one of the consideration, but we also need to think about, you know, how the design may tie into the rest of the corridor itself. And, you know, without speaking to something that may not be correct, I'm going to pass it on to Phil because he is our guru in roundabout. So Phil, maybe you can talk a little bit about, you know, some of the specific, you know, details related to cyclists and pedestrian crossing in the context of a roundabout.
Well, just that's something we're going to be looking at, absolutely. And we have a couple ideas in mind, but not to give anything away, but it's certainly top of mind as to how we're going to accomplish this. So like I said, we will be looking at some different options, and it'll be playing a big part in the evaluation between the two alternatives. Absolutely. It's a very important consideration, and it's something we'll be looking at very closely for sure. I'm a cyclist, I totally get it. So be a very important consideration for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And just building on that, Councillor Harris, just emphasizing the contextual appropriateness that will be a big factor of that evaluation. And we'll also be looking at deprioritizing level of service for cars. That is a consideration that roundabouts might be a bit more car oriented. So we need to make sure that we're just weighing things right and not overemphasizing any kind of weightings based on purely auto performance. So that's definitely a strong factor that we'll be looking at as we progress through this study.
Okay, thank you. That because I knew it was a factor. What I wanted to determine, and thank you for that, was how much of a factor and how is that weighted? And again, you know, moving the weight from the automobile to other methods. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. We all, as a team, we've really talked a lot about the contextual appropriateness of this, and it's going to be a very heavy factor when we go into evaluation of this. And again, we can't speak for the study; it needs to play out, but we're going to see that weighting be a fair weighting, and it's something that we'll be putting out to the public too, potentially as we proceed through subsequent PICs for feedback. So
great, thank you. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Councillor. So our next set of comments actually came from Leonard. So first, there are a couple of comments noting that the two-lane Bradford Street conflicts with the objective of providing more capacity and inviting more drivers to use from Lakeshore Road, and the city's emergency rely on the four-lane service for access for emergency scenes as well. The following comment then noted in early 2000, this council looked at the number of north-south lanes between Highway 400 and Kempenfelt Bay and tried widening Innisfil Street to a 3-lane cross section, but that was defeated by council. And he thinks that in the end, the number of north-south lanes that would be available, which includes Ann Street, Innisfil Street, Bradford Street, Lakeshore Drive, added up to 2 lanes, less than what was available. So the question was, when do you see Ann Street widen to 5 lanes from Tiffin to Essa? So maybe Leonard, we'll open it to you if you would like to add on to what is in your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. A few years ago, when Lakeshore Drive was reconstructed and opened up, one of the first concerns that the general public came to council was how are emergency crews ever going to get down Lakeshore Drive when you have parked cars on there and it's jammed up in the afternoon with people using Lakeshore Drive in the summer, especially. And one of the first things that the fire chief came back with is said, we don't use Lakeshore Drive, we use Bradford Street because it's 4 lanes. Why would we go on a 2-lane street when we have a 4-lane street right next to it? So that's my point, is that I don't see Bradford Street going down to 2 lanes, even just for the emergency crews alone. The other point was about the number of north-south lanes back in the early 2000s. And I think that in the end, that study was showing that we needed 2 more lanes than what that EA had projected being available. So you got 2 on Lakeshore, you got 4 on Bradford, you got 2 on Innisfil, so that's 6 lanes already, 8 lanes already. And then you had 5 on Ann Street. And I think the EA back in the early 2000s was counting on a 5th lane on Bradford Street as well. And the traffic projected at that point said we needed 2 more lanes than what was available on those 4 streets. Again, that points out that I don't think Bradford Street is going to go down to 2 lanes. We're already 2 lanes short.
So Leonard, thank you for your comment. And this kind of reflect to what we were saying earlier. You know, we did receive comments about, you know, the consideration of going down to 2 lanes. However, you know, we do recognize, you know, the overall transportation needs. So we do want to take this opportunity once again to look at it more holistically on the network level. I know you mentioned some of the earlier study looking at, you know, across some of these north-south corridors, you know, what are the total lanes, what are the needs? And I think from our perspective, you know, we will definitely have to take that into consideration as our next step. Also very similarly, you know, look at the whole network in that north-south direction. What does it mean collectively from a transportation capacity perspective? And also your point about emergency services, that's definitely one of our consideration as well, because whenever we look at a road corridor improvement, we always make sure that the emergency services are part of our stakeholder, and they're, you know, they're also aware of what we're proposing. We do include them in our discussion in terms of their needs. So I don't know, Brad or Gilly, anything you guys may want to add?
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly, and no, great input, Leonard. Looking back to the original 1999 waterfront downtown transportation study, so that they've assessed this downtown transportation network, forecasting to 2021 for a population of 160, and that's actually pretty close. But at that point, the key kind of takeaway is they were planning the 5 lanes for that population of roughly 160 in 21. We're still at 5 lanes for a population of 298,000. So we're almost doubled. And that just kind of ties back to Phil's comments about just how the rate of auto increase is slowing drastically. And then we're seeing much more exponential growth and planning for exponential growth on kind of our AT and transit side. So that's just how hits that point home. And that recommendation has been consistent through that study, the 1999 study, the follow-on 2002 study, picked up again in the 2014 Transportation Master Plan, and again in the 2019 Transportation Master Plan. But we are going to have another look at it in a little bit more detail and just see if there's any opportunities. But it's like what we've said too, it's just a lack of capacity on adjacent corridors is really driving kind of the needs, but we'll fully test that and assess that as part of next steps. And then just the question on N Street, that's a project we'd like to do, but it's been pushed off slightly by works that MTO is planning with S Road interchange starting next year. So that is, well, sorry, this year now, 22. So 22, 23, 24, slightly extending into 25. But then we have Dunlop starting in roughly 24, 25, 26, maybe touching 27. So we're kind of looking towards the very late 20s, early 30s when we could realistically get to that. But it's a bit in flux because we would like to get the adjacent section of ESSA between Ann Street and the interchange itself dealt with at some point. But there's been various challenges trying to coordinate that work with the development beside that. But that's where we're at with that project right now.
Thanks, Brad. And thanks, Leonard. So our next question is from Allison. Question is, I'm curious if opening up one of the lanes in each direction on Bradford Street for walking and cycling is being considered. So Allison, maybe we can open up the floor to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the options kind of went through fast and I haven't really found them anywhere else. So I just wanted to check if there's any thoughts about making a kind of temporary, like putting it down temporarily to 2 lanes rather than doing studies, just to see how that works. I guess partly what I'm thinking is if we're adding like multi-use buildings of high density on Bradford Street into the future, having 4 or 5 lanes is really difficult for people to like cross the street, and it makes it a very much like a corridor for movement of vehicles and not really like a place that people actually want to hang out or be. So, and then I guess long term as well, like temporarily trying it out for a lower capacity could again still give the option of having it back to 4 lanes in the future if that's what's needed. But also again, like as people kind of move to Barrie, like thinking about the people that are moving there, if there's road space available, like people are probably gonna get into their vehicles and kind of take that as the default of how to move around Barrie. Whereas if we reduce road capacity a little bit right now, then some of the people that are moving as these buildings are built are the ones who might be switching to multimodal, to walking, cycling, taking the lovely transit stuff that's right there in the near term.
Thanks, Allison. That's a great question. I mean, I know in our presentation earlier, we talk about the potential for interim solution as well. So maybe with that, I'll pass along to Brad. Speaking to any potential that the city may consider, a pilot study or anything of that nature.
Yeah, we'll take that back with the project team. I know I've thought about this too quite a bit. If we weren't growing, that would be an ideal solution, being able to do that. That's just with the growth aspect, it's a bit challenging, but we will take that back and see if that would be something that wouldn't create unintended consequences that I can't speak to right now. We did do a pilot last year with COVID, and that plays a significant factor, I'll admit to that, about shutting down Lakeshore Drive itself for segments. The uptake wasn't huge. There could be numerous factors for that, but that's something to be considered. The other element is just the gravity that our waterfront has. People love being on the waterfront. They'll detour out of their way to get to the waterfront, to use the waterfront trails. We see people willing to sit in their car for extended periods of time in traffic queues just to be on the waterfront, to take in the beautiful views. So that's another element too that we have thought quite a bit about. Is there a need for that temporary road diet, but with such high quality AT infrastructure on the city's waterfront, it's a bit of a question for sure. It's something we'll take back, but I really appreciate the question, Allison.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Allison. So our next three questions actually are from Catherine. Maybe we'll go through them one by one. So first is related to traffic volume. The second is related to roundabout. And then the last one is about cycling volume. So I think in general, all these questions are related to either traffic volume or in around the roundabout itself. So so Catherine will bring you online, and I think I'm going to ask Phil to answer these questions. So first is about traffic volume between ESSA to Tiffin, with the increase in development coming and increases during May to October tourist season. Have these volume been included? Are you looking at current numbers? So Catherine, let me know if you're online, if there's anything you want to add.
I am online, thank you.
Perfect.
And I hope you understand the question. I was just, same thing, I was trying to remember what the question was and maybe how to frame it. But we have a lot of potential development coming. As you know, there's approximately 8 tall towers coming along ESSA Road at Innisfil, and ESSA, including the Osmington development right up at the 400 in ESSA Road. So that's going to bring a lot of intensification in terms of people and cars. And then over and above that, we have just our regular increase in volume of traffic through May to October with tourism, people wanting to come to our beaches and use the beaches and our waterfront. So, have those numbers been included in you looking at everything? And when was the last time, we actually had an actual current study done?
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we're pretty confident we've captured things. Now, what we do in these traffic studies is we try to come up with like a baseline traffic condition. So what we've done is we've come up with a 2021 base, but we based that on several prior traffic counts. And then we've kind of ramped them all up to 2021, recognizing that they're all these different counts are taken at different times. And, the pre-COVID, of course, and they are, some of them were fall, some of them were summer, some were different times. So we've kind of taken them and tried to, what we do is we balance them, right? So because they're taken at different intersections, different times a year or whatever, we tend to take the highest ones out of all of them and then balance them so that, traffic coming out of one intersection matches traffic going into the next one. So what tends to happen is that we take the highest out of all of them and match them so that everything balances. So that tends to be kind of a conservative assumption, and it generally ends up is that we take the highest out of all of them, which is usually summer or peak season or tourist season or whatever. So we're pretty confident we've taken, these sorts of peaks into account. And we've, like I said, we have to look at pre-COVID and things like that. So we're pretty confident we've taken these things into account. Plus we've added in area developments like the things you've seen here and everything else. And that will represent the base condition before we add in, all the traffic growth and things like that I talked about before. So, hopefully we've taken in all these things that you mentioned. So.
Okay, thank you. My second question related to the roundabout and the one that's closest, like at Lakeshore, not Tiffin, but at Lakeshore.
I'll just jump ahead of those.
Yeah. Does that? That's quite a large roundabout, obviously. Would you be looking at impacting the Heritage Corner where the current farmhouse restaurant is and where the buildings there are? You would not be in any way impacting those particular buildings?
No, neither alternative we're impacting those. We're
okay.
Being very careful there.
Okay. And then do we understand our cycling volumes actually at this point? Like, have you done traffic studies on bicycle traffic, if you will? Given, typically now, I don't see a lot of people out cycling during the winter months and bad weather. We have a lot of bad weather in Barrie through the winter months, and even, with high winds and so on. So I'm just really wondering the cycling volumes that we think we might have.
No, we don't have a handle on pedestrian and cycling volumes, and typically they aren't counted when we count, vehicles. I mean, they aren't often captured in traffic counts. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't, but cycling traffic is typically not captured. But it doesn't really matter because we just assume that cycling volumes are significant enough that we have to account for them. So whether it's 10 cyclists or 100 cyclists, we're going to account for them and we're going to design for them. And no matter what they are now, we know they're going to increase in the future, and we have to design for them anyway. So no matter what they are now, they're going to be higher in the future, and we have to design for them regardless. So that's what we're going to do.
Okay. And I did have just one last question, which I don't think showed up here, was on slide 29, it talks about tie-in with the rail crossing at ESSA.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't understand what that actually meant.
Right. So maybe I can take that one. Phil, if you wouldn't mind queuing to either slide 31 or 32, where we can see ESSA and the rail line itself. So you see on this figure where it's labeled the rail line. So that's actually where the rail tracks crosses ESSA Road at grade. So basically where the road surface is. So when we think about road design, here we can see, the intersection skew a little bit. We're mindful of some of the existing constraints that are in the area. So for example, the rail line is not moving, it's not going anywhere. So we're mindful that the road itself, we will have to connect to that portion of the south leg of the intersection, basically where the existing rail lines are. So that's what we meant when we say tying into the rail crossing, because that crossing is not going anywhere.
I live and breathe that every day. I live in the immediate neighborhood.
Yeah, that's often one of the challenges when it comes to road design is, the rail tracks are not going anywhere, so you need to plan around it.
Yeah, and often we mean kind of in the vertical sense as well, right? So there's not a big hump as you go over it or whatever.
Exactly. So we're mindful of the elevation, so then where the intersection is set is not a big drop as we cross the rail line.
And I also heard earlier prior to the meeting that you will be doing a presentation or coming to a Heritage Committee meeting in March. You're hoping maybe?
We're hoping for that. Absolutely. And if we're happy to come in and have a discussion, and if you folks have any specific questions, let us know in advance, and we can queue up the appropriate people if there's really detailed heritage questions. But we're happy to come to Heritage Barrie and sit down with you folks and discuss this project in more detail. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Catherine.
Great presentation, by the way. Lots of good information in here.
Thanks. Thank you. So next question, back to Allison. You talk about here is it how is growth relevant and capacity is low, and you also have a comment about Lakeshore.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to follow up on my previous question. Just I for like two parts. I guess the first one is just I want to understand why the growing aspect makes a difference in trialing the road diet. I don't understand the logic.
It makes it a bit challenging to reverse it if we don't have the accompanying cycling infrastructure to take that back on. So it's more of a timing aspect. So it's difficult to take away cycling lanes. But that being said, that's something we're definitely going to think about. There's been no one saying no right now. So we'll definitely take that back and think that through a little in a little bit more detail to see, is there a rational way that we could accommodate something like that? In consideration of all the factors kind of we talked about with kind of the high quality facility at the waterfront, does it make sense to invest the money? And you actually made a really good point about kind of if you present a sea of asphalt, encouraging drivers. I'm actually working on a staff report related to parking on streets and in the same light. So it's, no, that's really great. I thought it was really pertinent because that staff report I was working on was today. So it's it's a great point, and we'll take that back absolutely. And that's kind of as much as I can get into it right now on that. But we can keep in touch with us, and we can go talk more about it for sure.
Okay, well, I think maybe we're having a miscommunication because I'm saying like to put it in temporarily, so it's like easy, so it's cheap and like easy to take out, like tactical urbanism style,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you know. Like that's
Yeah,
all.
no, we can. Yeah, we'll definitely think about that more and see if we can. Yeah, like a retrofit with road painting. Absolutely. I think. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. So we'll definitely think about that more if we can accommodate that.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing I just wanted to say, following up on your comments on Lakeshore, like, because I was excited when I heard that something like that was being tried, and then it was happening on a tiny section of Lakeshore that was already right beside the path.
Yeah.
Bradford is a bit further, so
Yeah.
it's not in this slide that's up there, but a little bit further down, like it is further off. So if you're trying to like connect to somewhere, it makes a bit more sense as a connection. And then again, like I just want to clarify, like one of the comments that I'm saying is if you're putting in a bunch of multi-use buildings, like with ground floor restaurants, for instance, like some people might be coming from the lake to Bradford, trying to cross the street to get to where, like whatever kind of retail they want to get to. But if it's, you know, 4 or 5 lanes, that doesn't really attract people to those businesses that are trying to make a living on those ground floors.
One of the key themes, regardless of how this goes, that we've heard and is also in line with our official plan is really nobody wants to see a suburban type cross section. They want to see a high quality urban cross section. So in those instances, not saying it is, we have to go through the study, but say it was still 4 lanes plus a turning lane, we would neck in the boulevards as much as possible. We'd have medians, we'd have raised crosswalks potentially, really create kind of like an urban environment if that was the way this goes, which it's too early in the study to say that, but I think that's been a very clear message that we really want to create a really great urban road, something that we really haven't seen before outside of Dunlop Street, and not just a suburban typical 5-lane cross section.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allison, again. So our next question is from Philip. It says, if the city proceeds with upgrading or modifying Bradford Street and other key roads in the area, will it include replacement of older wood frame building near those roadways? Philip, will open the floor to you.
Yes. Behind the condominium buildings on the lake shore and between Bradford Street, there are several older wood frame structures. They're in various states of repair, and there are other buildings along Bradford Street. So what will be the future for those buildings? Will they eventually be, removed and replaced by condominium towers or other types of structures?
Yes, and since this is a long-range planning study, the intent is to really look to implement this further along in the future. So, and we're kind of looking at a potential 20-year horizon, which also aligns with this road's service life. So in that 2040 kind of time frame, pending any kind of change from council direction, this could always change, but that's kind of where we're at right now. So we wouldn't be looking to proactively go in, kind of buy property today, look to kind of expropriate or purchase homes and do any demolitions as part of this effort at all. It's really trying to frame this corridor for redevelopment and just setting the stage for us to kind of implement this in the future. And this would be subject to an additional study as we're 10 years, these studies typically have a 10-year shelf life. So we're at 22 now. If we're looking at implementation in say 41, and these projects typically take 8 years from kind of start of an EA. So we'd be looking at doing this project in a little more detail around that 2032, 33, so that we can really lock in what is the in situ conditions on that corridor, what has redeveloped, what hasn't. And that's where the rubber really hits the road in terms of really starting to squeeze the design so we can mitigate impacts as much as possible. But where we're at right now, we're still kind of quite a ways out. So we just want to we're a little bit cautious, we're a little bit conservative, and we're just kind of in recognition of the steps to come in the future. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
Great, thanks, Philip. And this is the last question. Philip's question is actually the last on our list. So looking at the time as well, it's almost 8:20. So I just want to do a last round of call to see if anyone here may have any further questions that you would like to ask our panelists this evening. And don't forget, our presentation that you saw this evening is and it's available on the website and can be downloaded, and you can rewatch it. And if you have any further questions, you can certainly reach out to the study team. And Phil, if you wouldn't mind just queuing to the last slide again, just reminding everyone, where they can find on the website to look for that link for that online comment form. You can submit your questions to us that way. We're always here to answer your questions, and we really appreciate everyone's time this evening and your interest in this study. We've had some great discussion tonight, and like we were saying, we're early on. We're really happy to hear all the input and all the feedback this evening, so that we can proceed to the next phase of our study. And as you saw in the next step, our plan is to present the preferred planning solutions at our next public information center, which is going to be held in late spring 2022. And anyone who have provided us with your email address, you'll be notified of future public information center. So Brad, Phil, Gilly, anything you may want to add?
Oh, I see Dave Clemens has a question, so I'll just allow him to talk and ask that before we head out.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, I live on Toronto Street, and I noticed there's emergency vehicles go down Bradford and Lakeshore. And the other question I have is, when the 400 has an accident on it, it ties up for all the traffic here tremendously.
Thanks, Dave, for that. That's appreciate that question in the comment. Typically, I can't speak for how they exactly take their route. They probably do frequently use Bradford, but I'm sure depending on where they're going, they might use Lakeshore as well. We will be having, we have reached out to emergency services just to have a discussion with them, so we'll definitely loop back with them. And that was also, although we don't design for that kind of event, it's definitely consideration that even if the 400 is closed down, or a busy Saturday or Sunday when folks are going to the cottage or coming back, it's quite, if the traffic's slow on the 400, a lot of folks infiltrate the downtown, take Blake, take Lakeshore, out to Essa or other routes, and it is, I live in the area as well, and it can be quite slow. So definitely something we're thinking about.
Thanks, Brad. Gilly, are you seeing any other raise of hands?
I don't think so. One just popped up, but I think it went back down. So
okay.
Okay, well, I'll just say a few marks. I want to really, again, thank everyone for attending. Really appreciate the time you spent with us tonight. We really appreciate your feedback. Your feedback is very important to the process. Again, no decisions are being made. Tonight, we're going through and progressing through our EA process and undertaking our multi-factor evaluation. So with PIC2, we'll be presenting the recommendations from our planning alternatives, and that will inform us moving into design alternatives, where we'll evaluate those and present those, and I believe a PIC scheduled for the fall of 22. So there's still lots more of the study to come, lots more opportunity for public engagement. If anyone has any questions or comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to myself. I think my contact information is listed on the project website, or Phil Weber as well. And again, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Good night. I'm going to stop recording.